The tragic life and end of the Dells members is truly heartbreaking. Did you know that the Dells, one of the greatest R&B groups in history, carried a dark secret behind their sweet harmonies? To the world, they were the kings of romance, the voices that gave us timeless songs like "Oh, What a Night" and "Stay in My Corner." But behind the smooth melodies and chart-topping success was a story laced with tragedy, betrayal, and heartbreak. Their journey wasn't just about music. It was about survival against odds so brutal that most groups would have crumbled in silence. What if I told you their story includes a horrific car accident that nearly destroyed their dream illnesses, that silenced their most powerful voices, and deaths that left fans grieving long before the world was ready to say goodbye? From the outside, the Dells seemed untouchable. They sang with the precision of angels, they carried themselves like legends, and they stood shoulder to shoulder with icons like Ray Charles and Dinah Washington. But behind the curtains, their reality was very different. In 1958, tragedy struck when a devastating crash on the Ohio Turnpike shattered their bond, leaving Michael "Mickey" McGill fighting for his life and the group's future hanging by a thread. That accident was described by the members themselves as the moment that tore us apart, a nightmare that turned dreams into ashes overnight. For fans, it was just another group that disappeared from the charts. But for the men inside the Dells, it was the beginning of a long battle with fate. And even when they clawed their way back, proving themselves at the Apollo Theater and rebuilding their careers with iconic records, destiny was still cruel. Johnny Funches, the original lead singer whose voice launched their first hits, was struck down by pneumonia gone far too soon. Johnny Carter, who later stepped in and gave the group a second life, waged a bitter war against cancer that he ultimately lost. Marvin Jr., the booming baritone whose sustained note in "Stay in My Corner" stunned audiences into silence, battled kidney failure and heart disease until his body could no longer carry him. Chuck Barksdale, the foundation of their deep harmonies, spent years in pain before his passing, marked another devastating chapter in the group's decline. Yes, they eventually earned their long-overdue spot in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004, but by then the cost of loyalty and endurance had already been paid in blood, sweat, and too many funerals. Their tears at that ceremony weren't just for joy. They were for the brothers they had buried, the struggles they had endured, and the haunting question of why recognition took so long to arrive. So tonight, as we peel back the curtain on the Dells, remember this. What you thought was a fairy tale of 5 young men chasing stardom was in reality a saga of heartbreak, sacrifice, and resilience. Their music may have promised joy and romance, but their lives tell a much darker story. Was their tragic ending destiny or the cruel price of greatness in an industry that too often forgets its pioneers? When you press play on this story, you're not just watching another documentary about a music group. You're stepping inside the untold journey of the Dells. This video will pull back the curtain and reveal everything the history books only touched on. From their humble beginnings in Harvey, Illinois, where 5 high school boys harmonized under viaducts, to the dizzying heights of stardom with their chart-shattering anthem, "Oh, What a Night," we're going to trace their rise step by step. But more importantly, we're going to shine a light on the tragedies that haunted them at every turn. Here you'll discover the devastating 1958 car accident that could have ended it all the night their dreams were shattered in twisted metal and broken bones. You'll see how against the odds they clawed their way back to stages like the Apollo Theater, proving their resilience to the toughest audiences in America. And you'll learn how the group's loyalty to one another, rare in the ruthless world of R&B, kept them alive, even as the music industry tried to pull them apart. But this story isn't simply about fame and survival, it's also about loss. We will revisit the heartbreaking deaths of beloved members like Johnny Funches, who fell to pneumonia, Johnny Carter, who fought a brave but losing battle with cancer, and the legendary Marvin Jr., whose booming baritone was silenced by kidney and heart disease. And then there was Chuck Barksdale, whose deep bass voice anchored their sound until illness took him away. One by one, the voices that made the Dells immortal were silenced, leaving behind not just music, but also lingering questions about the price of loyalty, the burden of longevity, and the cruelty of time. Finally, this video will take you to the moment of recognition that came far too late, their 2004 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. After being overlooked for years, after 9 failed nominations, the industry finally admitted what fans already knew. The Dells had carved their names into history. The tears they shed on that stage were not just tears of joy. They were tears for brothers lost for years of struggle and for the bittersweet taste of overdue justice. Now, before we dive deeper, it's important to make something clear. What you are about to hear is based on publicly available information, archived news reports, published interviews, and accounts from those who lived alongside the Dells. Some details come from personal recollections and memoirs, meaning they represent perspectives rather than undisputed fact. For that reason, nothing here should be taken as definitive proof of every event, but rather as a tapestry woven from the records and voices that remain. With that said, this video promises you one thing. By the time we finish, you will understand not just how the Dells became legends, but also why their story is remembered today not only as one of success, but as one of the most tragic and heartbreaking sagas in the history of R&B. The story of the Dells begins not in a grand studio, but in the small town of Harvey, Illinois, just south of Chicago. It was the early 1950s. A time when rhythm and blues was still finding its voice, and the dreams of young African-American men often collided with the harsh realities of segregation, limited opportunities, and the struggle for recognition. Inside the walls of Thornton Township High School, 5 boys who shared a passion for music decided to create something that would outlast the walls of their classrooms. Those 5 young men were Marvin Jr., Michael Mickey McGill, Chuck Barksdale, Vern Allison, and Johnny Funches. Each one carried something unique, something that when woven together created a harmony that would change R&B history. Their story wasn't polished at first. In fact, when they began performing at neighborhood parties, they were booed more often than cheered. But failure never discouraged them. It pushed them. Under bridges, in ice cream shops, and in backyards, they practiced relentlessly, dreaming of the day their voices would be heard. Marvin Jr. was born with a voice that seemed too large for his body. A baritone with a thunderous yet emotional delivery, he became the emotional anchor of the Dells. Yet Marvin's beginnings were marked by doubt. Early on, even industry executives dismissed him, telling him he didn't have the voice to make it. Those words cut deep, but they also fueled him. Over time, Marvin would prove everyone wrong, especially with his unforgettable sustained note in "Stay in My Corner." His ability to pour raw emotion into a song made him the group's heartbeat, and later, one of the most recognizable voices in R&B. Mickey McGill provided the baritone balance that filled out the group's harmonies. But perhaps what defined him most was his resilience. In the infamous 1958 car accident that nearly ended the Dells' career, Mickey was the one who suffered most. Trapped in a hospital for 6 months, his body broken, many believed he would never return to the stage. Yet Mickey fought his way back, driven not only by love for music, but also by his high school sweetheart Rose, whom he married after recovering. His loyalty to the group never wavered, and his story remains a testament to survival. If Marvin was the heart, Chuck Barksdale was the foundation. His bass voice grounded the Dells' sound, giving their harmonies the depth and richness that separated them from other groups. Off stage, Chuck was known for his larger-than-life personality, always quick with humor, but equally committed to discipline. As illness later dimmed his light, fans realized just how much his booming presence had defined the group's identity. He wasn't simply the bass, he was the gravity that kept the Dells balanced. Vern Allison may not have had the showy presence of Marvin or Chuck, but he embodied the quiet resilience that made the Dells endure. His tenor voice blended seamlessly into the harmonies, ensuring the group's sound remained smooth and consistent. While others faltered, Vern stayed steady, often acting as the glue that held personalities together through decades of triumphs and conflicts. In an industry where groups fell apart overnight, Vern's loyalty and discipline became one of the Dells' secret weapons. Before Marvin became the group's lead, it was Johnny Funches who first carried the Dells into the spotlight. His smooth tenor gave life to the early recordings, including the original version of "Oh, What a Night." For many fans, Johnny was the voice they associated with the group's rise. Tragically, his time was cut short not just with the group, but in life itself. Struck by pneumonia, Johnny's death left a painful void, a reminder that even legends are not immune to fate's cruelty. Yet his contribution lives on, immortalized in those first recordings that made the world stop and listen. When Johnny Funches stepped away, the Dells needed more than just a replacement. They needed someone who could bring fresh energy without breaking their brotherhood. Enter Johnny Carter, formerly of the Flamingos, another legendary doo-wop group. Carter's story carried its own heartbreak. Drafted into the Army, just as the Flamingos were ascending, he returned to find himself shut out of his original group. For years, he drifted until fate placed him in the Dells' orbit. With his silky, smooth falsetto and impeccable range, Carter completed the puzzle. He wasn't just a replacement, he became a cornerstone, staying with the Dells for over 4 decades. Sadly, like many of his brothers, his journey ended in illness. But his voice remains one of the most celebrated in the history of R&B. The turning point for the Dells came in 1956 with the release of "Oh, What a Night." Written by Johnny Funches and Marvin Jr., the song captured the magic of youthful romance and late-night joy. Though the original recording made waves, it was the 1969 re-release arranged by the brilliant Charles Stepney that catapulted them to superstardom. This version soared to #1 on the R&B charts and reached the Pop Top 10, proving that the Dells weren't just a local act, they were a national treasure. The song became more than just a hit. It became a cultural touchstone later immortalized in the film The 5 Heartbeats, ensuring that generations who hadn't grown up with the Dells would still recognize the timeless magic of their harmonies. Unlike many groups that crumbled under industry pressures, the Dells' beginnings in Harvey instilled in them a resilience that carried them through decades. They weren't manufactured by a label. They were forged in neighborhood basements and street corners, bonded by shared struggle and shared dreams. Each member brought not only his voice but his life story into the group. And those stories of survival, heartbreak, loyalty, and sacrifice are what gave their music its soul. When you hear Marvin Jr. hold that impossibly long note in "Stay in My Corner," you're not just hearing a singer showing off. You're hearing a man who was once told he wasn't good enough. When you hear the deep rumble of Chuck Barksdale, you're not just hearing harmony, you're hearing the weight of a man who carried his group through decades of storms. And when you hear "Oh, What a Night," you're not just hearing a love song, you're hearing the memory of 5 boys from Harvey who dreamed bigger than their small town could hold. The Dells' story began with 5 teenagers who only wanted to sing for fun. But through grit, talent, and an unbreakable bond, they transformed into one of the most influential R&B groups of all time. Their members were more than just vocalists. They were survivors, brothers, and innovators whose lives shaped the sound of a generation. And while the world remembers them for the beauty of their music, the truth of who they were, the tragedies they endured, the battles they fought, and the love they shared makes their journey all the more powerful. The saga of the Dells is not just about a group of singers who found success. It is about survival, reinvention, and resilience across decades. Their timeline reads like a novel filled with hope, tragedy, and eventual redemption. Let's walk through it step by step. In the early 1950s, inside Thornton Township High School in Harvey, Illinois, 5 young dreamers came together. Marvin Jr., Mickey McGill, Chuck Barksdale, Vern Allison, and Johnny Funches shared a common love harmony. They called themselves the L Rays and began singing anywhere they could, talent shows, parties, and even under viaducts where the echo made them sound larger than life. But being a neighborhood act wasn't enough. They longed for a bigger stage, and fate soon led them to Chess Records, the Chicago powerhouse that launched legends like Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. It was here that Vivian Carter of VJ Records suggested they change their name. Out of a hat came a new identity, the Dells, short, memorable, and destined for history. Their first big moment came in 1956 when they recorded "Oh, What a Night," written by Johnny Funches and Marvin Jr. It was inspired by a party filled with fried chicken whiskey and laughter, a night so unforgettable it deserved a song. The single soared, reaching the R&B top 10 and giving the Dells national exposure. Suddenly, the boys from Harvey were not just local kids, they were stars. Their harmonies flowed across radio waves from New York to Los Angeles, and soon they found themselves booked at the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem, the ultimate proving ground. When they walked on that stage, they didn't just sing, they conquered. The crowd embraced them, and the Dells became certified professionals. But success often comes hand in hand with tragedy. On November 21, 1958, while driving on the Ohio Turnpike, disaster struck. Their station wagon blew a tire and spun out of control. Johnny Funches was at the wheel. Mickey McGill suffered the worst injuries, spending 6 months in the hospital. The others, though physically spared, were shattered emotionally. The accident left the group fractured. They had just begun tasting success, but now their future was in ruins. For a time, the Dells dissolved. Members took factory jobs or drifted away, their dreams of stardom fading like smoke. But destiny wasn't finished with the Dells. By 1961, they reunited stronger and hungrier than ever. Their big break came when they auditioned for Dinah Washington, the Queen of the Blues. Dinah was known for her brilliance and her fiery temper, but when she heard the Dells, she recognized rare talent. She hired them as her backing group, bringing them on tour. Working under Dinah was like going to a master class. She was demanding, sometimes firing people in anger only to rehire them the next day, but she sharpened the Dells into professionals. They learned stagecraft vocal control and how to survive the chaos of the music industry. By the time they finished with Dinah, they were no longer just doo-wop singers. They were versatile vocalists, equally comfortable in jazz, soul, and R&B. During this time, Johnny Funches decided to step away, choosing family life over the grind of touring. The group brought in Johnny Carter, formerly of the Flamingos. His silky falsetto and unmatched range completed the puzzle. With Carter in the lineup, the Dells were reborn. By the mid-1960s, the Dells had transformed into one of the most polished vocal groups in America. In 1966, they earned a prestigious role opening for Ray Charles on tour. Performing at places like Carnegie Hall, they received 5 standing ovations in one night, a testament to their brilliance. But the road wasn't easy. Ray Charles's manager dismissed them from the tour despite their success. Still, the exposure boosted their profile. Around this time, they released There Is 1966, followed by the iconic Stay in My Corner, 1967. The latter became legendary for Marvin Jr.'s impossibly long, sustained note so powerful that DJs joked they could leave the studio, eat lunch, and return before the note ended. In 1969, they did something rare. They re-recorded Oh, What a Night. This time with new arrangements by Charles Stepney, the song exploded. It hit #1 on the R&B charts and broke into the Billboard Pop Top 10. The re-release wasn't just nostalgic, it was transformative. It cemented the Dells as not just survivors of the doo-wop era, but innovators who could adapt to changing times. While many of their peers disappeared, the Dells endured, bridging generations of fans. After decades of hits and loyal touring, the Dells finally received the recognition they deserved. In 2004, after 9 previous nominations, they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For a group that had stayed together for over 50 years, it was bittersweet. During the ceremony, they spoke of family, both the members on stage and the brothers they had lost. Tears filled their eyes as they stood in front of the world, honored at last. Fans and fellow musicians gave them a standing ovation, a final acknowledgement that the Dells were true pioneers. Each death was another note silenced, another harmony broken. By then, the group could no longer perform. What had once been 5 young dreamers had become a legacy written in both triumph and tears. From high school halls in Harvey to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Dells lived one of the longest-running stories in R&B history. Their career spanned over 5 decades, longer than most marriages, longer than most careers. Yet their journey was not defined only by success. It was defined by their ability to endure tragedy, reinvent themselves, and remain loyal to one another through every storm. And perhaps that is why the Dells stand apart. They weren't just another R&B act. They were brothers who turned pain into harmony, who turned heartbreak into timeless music, and who left behind not just songs, but a story of resilience that still inspires today. The tragic yet triumphant story of the Dells is not just told through their music, but through the words of those who lived it and the documents that recorded it. To separate myth from truth, we have to look at both the verified reports that made headlines and the heartfelt recollections shared by the group's own members. Together, they paint a picture of endurance, heartbreak, and legacy. One of the most powerful moments of testimony comes from Marvin Jr., the booming baritone, whose voice would later shake concert halls. In interviews, Marvin recounted a crushing early moment at Chess Records when Leonard Chess himself reportedly pulled him aside. "Look, Marvin, he was told I like you. But you're not a singer. You don't have the voice." Those words haunted him. For a time, Marvin even quit the group. Yet decades later, the irony was undeniable. The same voice that had once been dismissed would become legendary for sustaining one of the longest notes in R&B history on Stay in My Corner. Was Leonard Chess wrong? History says yes, but Marvin's own vulnerability shows us how deeply those words cut, and how close the group once came to losing him forever. This testimony is not rumor, it comes from Marvin's own mouth, captured in documentaries and public interviews. It is a reminder that even legends faced moments of doubt. The car crash that nearly ended the Dells in 1958 is one of the most documented events in their history. Newspaper archives, police reports, and hospital records confirm the tragedy on the Ohio Turnpike. Their station wagon's tire blew out and the vehicle flipped, leaving members bloodied and shaken. The most serious victim was Mickey McGill, who spent 6 long months in the hospital recovering. His testimony years later was filled with pain, but also resilience. "I just kept thinking, what am I doing in this factory?" he recalled, describing the months he spent trying to live an ordinary life afterward. The accident was not just physical, it fractured the group's spirit. They disbanded, each man going his own way. But the accident is one of those rare events where memory and record align. Newspapers covered it, fans mourned, and the scars remained long after. This was no rumor. This was fact. When the Dells reunited in the early 1960s, their next chapter unfolded under the fiery presence of Dinah Washington. Here, the testimonies become more nuanced. According to group members, Dinah was both a mentor and a tyrant, brilliant, demanding, and unpredictable. Vern Allison recalled her perfectionism. Dinah could sing a song without anyone playing a note, and she'd be in perfect key every time. Chuck Barksdale described the atmosphere as a crash course in survival. Being with Dinah for 2 years was like going to school for music. There are no police reports or medical records here. These are personal recollections. Some members claimed Dinah's temper was legendary. She would fire musicians mid-tour only to rehire them the next day. Others say she was fiercely protective, determined to sharpen the Dells into professionals. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. What is undeniable is that under her guidance, the Dells transformed from a local act into one of the tightest groups in R&B. The group's brief stint opening for Ray Charles in the mid-1960s is another chapter filled with both verifiable records and emotional testimonies. Concert listings, promotional posters, and newspaper reviews confirm that the Dells opened for Ray, even performing at Carnegie Hall in New York. Their performance there received 5 standing ovations, a fact noted by multiple reviewers. But what happened next remains in the realm of memory. According to the group, Ray Charles's road manager abruptly informed them they were being dropped from the tour. Imagine the shock from standing ovations at Carnegie Hall one night to being told to pack up and go home the next. In later interviews, Marvin Jr. recalled the humiliation. We blew the roof off the place, and the next day they told us we weren't going on. It didn't make sense. Theories swirled. Were they too good threatening to outshine the headliner? Or was it just the cold business of touring? No documents explain the decision, so this remains alleged, filtered through the pain of memory. What is clear is that Ray Charles himself eventually congratulated them years later when their careers soared, a sign of mutual respect despite the rocky past. One event needs no disclaimers: the 2004 induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Records, video footage, and countless press articles confirm the moment. After 9 failed nominations, the Dells were finally honored. During their acceptance, they spoke about family loyalty and survival. Marvin Jr., with tears in his eyes, said, "Next to God, this is the most important thing to us, our family." It was a public testimony, a declaration of what kept them going for over 50 years. The applause that night wasn't alleged, it was thunderous, and the footage still exists as proof. This was the industry finally acknowledging what fans had known for decades, that the Dells were among the greatest R&B groups of all time. Throughout their careers, the Dells often described themselves as more than bandmates. They were brothers. Testimonies from surviving members describe arguments, rivalries, and long nights on the road, but they also describe loyalty rare in the music industry. Chuck Barksdale once said, "We stayed together longer than most marriages." Vern Allison echoed, "We fought, we got mad, but we always came back together." These are not newspaper facts, but oral histories. They capture the spirit of a group that endured when so many others fell apart. The challenge in telling the Dells' story is balancing verified fact with alleged memory. The car accident of 1958, the chart success of "Oh What a Night" and their Rock Hall induction are all documented. But the emotional layers, the pain of Marvin being told he didn't have the voice, the humiliation of being dropped from Ray Charles's tour, the fiery mentorship of Dinah Washington, these come from testimonies. They are true in the sense that they reflect lived experience, even if they can't be measured by court records or police reports. In the end, the blend of fact and memory is what makes the Dells' story so compelling. They are not just figures in history books. They are men who laughed, cried, suffered, and triumphed. And their voices, preserved on vinyl and in memory, continue to testify long after their passing. The Dells' legacy is not only in the 40-plus hits they left behind, but in the way their story is told through both documented events and deeply personal recollections. The verified records anchor their history in fact. The alleged testimonies add flesh and soul, giving us the human side of legend. Perhaps the real truth lies in the harmony between the two. Just as the Dells' voices blended to create something greater than the sum of its parts, the mix of fact and memory creates the truest portrait of who they were. And maybe that's the greatest evidence of all, that even in tragedy, their story remains unforgettable. In the world of rhythm and blues, no group survives in isolation. Behind every legendary act, there exists a network of mentors, rivals, producers, and admirers whose stories are intertwined. For the Dells, this web of connections not only shaped their sound, but also secured their place in music history. Each relationship tells us something about who they were, how they survived, and why their legacy continues to ripple through the decades. When the Dells reunited after their devastating 1958 car accident, they were hungry but unrefined. They had talent, yes, but raw talent without discipline often burns out quickly in show business. That's when fate introduced them to Dinah Washington, the legendary queen of the blues. Dinah was more than a singer. She was a force of nature. Her voice commanded attention, and her reputation for demanding perfection was unmatched. Many feared working with her, but the Dells embraced it. She took them under her wing, making them her backup group on tour for 2 years. Her mentorship was both brutal and brilliant. Members later recalled how she would sometimes explode in rage, firing musicians mid-performance, only to bring them back the next day. Yet beneath her volatility was a fierce commitment to excellence. Dinah taught the Dells how to hold their audience, how to carry themselves as professionals, and how to adapt beyond doo-wop into jazz ballads and standards. Vern Allison once described it as going to school for music. Chuck Barksdale admitted that Dinah's perfectionism forced them to grow in ways they never imagined. Without her, the Dells might have remained a regional act. With her, they became versatile artists, capable of thriving in an ever-changing industry. In 1966, the Dells landed one of the greatest opportunities of their career opening for Ray Charles. Touring with Ray was a badge of honor. He was already a global superstar, one of the few black artists to break mainstream barriers. Sharing the stage with him was a chance to prove themselves on the biggest stages in America. At Carnegie Hall, the Dells brought the house down. Their harmonies and Marvin Jr.'s soulful delivery earned them 5 standing ovations, a staggering feat for an opening act. Yet the high was short-lived. The very next day, Ray Charles's road manager abruptly informed them that they were being dropped from the tour. To this day, the reasons remain unclear. Was it jealousy from management? A fear that the opening act was outshining the headliner? Or simply the business of touring logistics? The truth may never be known. What remains is the sting. The Dells felt a mixture of humiliation and confusion. And yet years later, Ray Charles himself acknowledged their greatness. When the Dells found renewed success, he congratulated them. It was as if the rivalry had transformed into mutual respect. The connection with Ray Charles may have been rocky, but it forged the Dells' resilience. They learned that even rejection could not silence their harmonies. If Dinah Washington was the mentor and Ray Charles was the rival, then Charles Stepney was the architect who built the Dells' most enduring sound. Stepney, a gifted arranger and producer later known for his work with Earth, Wind and Fire, had a genius for blending orchestration with soul. In the late 1960s, Stepney took the Dells into the studio and gave their music new life. His arrangement of Oh What a Night in 1969 transformed the song from a doo-wop classic into an R&B masterpiece. Strings soared, rhythms pulsed, and Marvin Jr.'s vocals cut through with raw passion. The result? A track that hit #1 on the R&B charts and landed in the Billboard Top 10, introducing the Dells to an entirely new generation. Stepney's influence extended beyond one hit. He helped craft The Love We Had Stays on My Mind and polished the group's overall sound into something cinematic and timeless. Under his guidance, the Dells became more than just a vocal group. They became storytellers capable of delivering operatic drama in 3-minute songs. His connection to the Dells also created a bridge to younger acts. Stepney's later work with Earth, Wind and Fire carried echoes of the lush arrangements he perfected with the Dells. Without Stepney, their catalog might have remained trapped in the 1950s. With him, it expanded into the future. Legacy isn't just about the music you make, it's about who carries your torch. For the Dells, their influence can be seen most clearly in groups like The Whispers and the O'Jays. The Whispers, known for their smooth harmonies and romantic ballads, often cited the Dells as trailblazers. The very idea that a vocal group could stay together for decades, weathering industry storms and personal trials, was modeled by the Dells long before. Their ability to sing about love and heartbreak with sincerity inspired the Whispers' own catalog. The O'Jays, on the other hand, drew inspiration from the Dells' emotional power. Songs like Backstabbers and Love Train carried the same kind of soul-drenched storytelling that the Dells perfected in hits like Stay in My Corner. Eddie Levert of the O'Jays once acknowledged that the Dells paved the way, proving that black vocal groups could command respect not only on R&B charts but in mainstream culture. Through these connections, the Dells' influence extended well beyond their own lifespan. They weren't just contemporaries of their era, they were mentors, examples, and inspirations for the next wave of soul. The Dells' story cannot be told without these connections. Dinah Washington shaped their discipline. Ray Charles reminded them of the brutal realities of show business. Charles Stepney elevated their artistry into the stratosphere. And groups like the Whispers and the O'Jays carried their torch, ensuring their influence would never die. This network reveals an important truth. The Dells were not just passengers in the story of R&B. They were architects, mentors, and survivors whose presence shaped the path of others. Their music echoed in their contemporaries and their successors, and even in the hip-hop era, where their songs were sampled by new generations. More than a group. The Dells were a hub in the vast web of black music history, a reminder that no voice ever truly stands alone, but resonates in chorus with those who come before and after. For all their achievements, the Dells' story is not without controversy and unanswered questions. One of the most glaring criticisms lies in the way the music industry treated them. Despite a career that spanned more than 50 years, despite over 40 charting singles, and despite being called the most enduring R&B group in history, the Dells were overlooked for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame 9 times before their eventual induction in 2004. 9 times. For fans and historians alike, this became a bitter reminder of how easily black artists, even legendary ones, could be sidelined by mainstream institutions. Why did it take so long? Some point to the politics of the Hall of Fame itself, an institution often criticized for prioritizing commercial fame over cultural impact. Others suggest the Dells' loyalty to one another ironically worked against them. While other groups courted controversy, drama, or solo careers that kept them in the spotlight, the Dells quietly stuck together. Their stability, instead of being celebrated, may have made them less newsworthy in an industry that thrives on spectacle. This raises a provocative question: did their very professionalism contribute to their delayed recognition? Another fascinating counterpoint comes from within the fan base itself. Some music historians argue that if the Dells had become too famous too quickly, say if their 1956 hit "Oh What a Night" had catapulted them into global superstardom overnight, the group might not have survived. The pressures of fame in the 1950s and 1960s were brutal, especially for black performers. Financial exploitation, constant touring, racism on the road, and the temptation of fame destroyed many of their contemporaries. The fact that the Dells rose more slowly and re-emerged stronger after setbacks may have been the very reason they endured for half a century. Then there are the personal recollections that don't always align perfectly. For example, accounts of their time with Ray Charles vary. Some recall the dismissal from his tour as a moment of betrayal, while others frame it as simple business. Similarly, stories about Dinah Washington swing between reverence for her genius and complaints about her volatility. These inconsistencies leave gaps in the narrative, but they also humanize it. Memory is imperfect, and oral history is colored by emotion. In a way, the holes in the Dells' story mirror the contradictions of the music industry itself, an industry where truth and myth often dance together. The biggest gap, perhaps, is the way mainstream culture often forgets the Dells entirely. Outside of die-hard R&B fans, many people recognize their songs, especially the immortal "Oh What a Night," without knowing the group behind them. Some blame a lack of aggressive promotion. Others point to changing musical tastes. But whatever the reason, this oversight raises uncomfortable questions about how quickly pioneers can be erased from popular memory. So we are left with a paradox. The Dells were both underappreciated and overqualified, overlooked and enduring. Their late recognition by the Hall of Fame stands as both a victory and a wound. And the counterpoint many fans still debate is: this was their long road to recognition, a failure of the industry? Or was it the very delay that allowed their brotherhood to survive longer than any of their peers? Every great story has its breaking point, the moment when all seems lost, only for fate to deliver an unexpected twist. For the Dells, that moment came on November 21st, 1958. What should have been another ordinary night on the road turned into catastrophe when their station wagon blew a tire on the Ohio Turnpike. The crash was violent. Mickey McGill was rushed to the hospital with severe injuries, spending 6 long months confined to a bed. The group, shaken to its core, had no choice but to disband. Fans assumed that was the end. After all, countless groups have disappeared after one tragedy. Without income, without direction, and with members drifting into factory jobs or struggling just to survive. The Dells looked like another cautionary tale in a ruthless industry. For a time, it seemed their dream had died on that stretch of highway, and yet that very accident became the crucible that forged their resilience. When McGill recovered and rejoined his brothers, something had changed. They were no longer just boys chasing applause. They were men who had already tasted loss and chosen to fight their way back. This reunion wasn't just about music. It was about unfinished business, and it gave the Dells a new, unbreakable bond that would carry them for decades. What was supposed to be the end became their rebirth. The second twist arrived not in tragedy, but in triumph. In 1967, the Dells recorded "Stay in My Corner," a soaring ballad of devotion. On paper, it was another love song, but in execution, it became historic. During the recording, Marvin Jr. held a note so impossibly long that it stunned everyone in the studio. It wasn't planned, it wasn't rehearsed, it was raw, primal power. Radio DJs joked that they could leave the booth, grab lunch, and return before Marvin finally took a breath. That sustained note became more than a vocal stunt. It symbolized the endurance of the Dells themselves, the refusal to give in, the determination to hold on no matter how long it took. Audiences erupted every time the song played. The single sold millions, transforming Marvin into a legend and cementing the Dells as masters of emotion and technique. These two twists, one born of tragedy, the other of triumph, defined the arc of the Dells' story. The crash that should have destroyed them became the test that bound them closer. The note that could have been a gimmick became their eternal signature. Together, they reveal the paradox of the Dells, a group whose greatest strength was forged in pain and whose greatest triumph was delivered in a single, unforgettable breath. Though the Dells' era has ended with the passing of so many original members, their story feels far from complete. In recent years, music documentaries have become powerful tools to resurrect the legacies of forgotten pioneers. Groups like the OJs and the Temptations have been given new life through films, miniseries, and in-depth documentaries that introduce them to younger audiences. Many fans believe the Dells are overdue for the same treatment. Their 6-decade journey spanning tragedy, resilience, and triumph offers all the drama and inspiration filmmakers crave. With their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction and timeless catalog, it seems only a matter of time before streaming platforms or music networks spotlight their untold story. Another avenue for their revival lies in the world of hip-hop sampling. For decades, producers have turned to classic R&B records for beats, hooks, and emotional depth. The Dells, with their lush harmonies and soaring arrangements, are a goldmine. Already, snippets of their work have appeared in underground hip-hop and soul-inspired tracks. As sampling continues to dominate popular music, expect more of the Dells' sound to re-emerge, stitched into new hits that bridge generations. In many ways, their harmonies are timeless, just as relevant in a 21st-century club track as they were in a 1960s ballroom. Hollywood, too, has kept their music alive. Perhaps the most famous example is The 5 Heartbeats 1991, a film loosely inspired by the Dells themselves. The soundtrack, especially A Heart is a House for Love, introduced their artistry to an entirely new generation who may not have recognized their name, but instantly felt the power of their music. As nostalgia cycles back into pop culture, it's likely that films, television shows, or commercials will continue to use the Dells' catalog, giving their voices a permanent place in collective memory. Beyond entertainment, their influence will persist in the stories of artists who name them as inspirations. Groups like The Whispers, the OJs, and even modern R&B ensembles often credit the Dells as trailblazers. Their loyalty to one another, lasting over 50 years, remains unmatched, and that story alone resonates in a world where most acts dissolve within a decade. It's the kind of narrative that music historians, journalists, and fans will keep revisiting. So what's next for the Dells? Likely more recognition, more rediscovery, and more reverence as time passes. Their music will be sampled. Their story may be dramatized, and their harmonies will continue to inspire both fans and artists who never had the chance to see them live. If history has shown anything, it's that true artistry never dies, it simply waits for the world to catch up. For the Dells, the future may not be about new performances, but about ensuring that their voices echo forever in the soundtrack of American music. In the end, the story of the Dells is one of both glory and heartbreak. For over 50 years, they stood as giants of R&B, an act that outlasted nearly every one of their peers, building a career longer than most marriages and more resilient than most friendships. From high school halls in Harvey, Illinois, to standing ovations at Carnegie Hall, their voices carried love loss and hope into the hearts of millions. They gave us anthems like "Oh What a Night" and "Stay in My Corner" songs that continue to resonate decades later. Yet for all their triumphs, their later years were marked by painful struggles. One by one, the voices that once soared began to fade. Johnny Funches was lost to pneumonia. Johnny Carter succumbed to cancer. Marvin Jr. battled kidney failure and heart disease, and Chuck Barksdale endured years of illness before his passing. Each death was another harmony silenced, leaving only memories where once there had been powerful song. And while they were finally honored with induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2004, the recognition came late after 9 nominations, and only when many of their most iconic voices were already gone. This raises an important and lingering question: why? Why did it take so long for the music industry to honor a group that influenced generations, mentored future stars, and defined an era? Was it because the public had forgotten them, swept up in the next wave of popular acts? Or was it the industry itself, too focused on short-term profit and flashy headlines, ignoring the quiet loyalty and consistent excellence of a group like the Dells? What cannot be denied is their impact. They inspired acts like The Whispers and the OJs. They bridged the gap between doo-wop soul and modern R&B. They left behind a body of work that continues to find life through hip-hop samples, film soundtracks, and timeless radio play. The Dells proved that even when fame fades, artistry endures. Their brotherhood, their harmonies, and their resilience remain lessons not only in music but in life itself. As we close this chapter, let us not remember the Dells only for the heartbreak of their final years, but for the half-century of beauty they brought into the world. They were more than entertainers. They were survivors, teachers, and voices of a generation. Their story reminds us that true legends don't disappear. They echo. Now we turn to you. Why do you think the Dells, despite their deep influence, were recognized so late? Was it public forgetfulness or the negligence of the music industry? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop your opinions in the comments. Share this video to keep the Dells' legacy alive, and don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more stories about the icons of Black excellence. Together we can ensure that legends like the Dells are never forgotten.